Hello, welcome to Section 5, Intro to International Business. Now this section deals with finances. We are in a financial crisis. The international financial market is in turmoil. Many say that it began in 2000, some say 2007, some say it began in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. There is no consensus on a beginning date. But while we don't have a consensus on a beginning date, we do realize that we're in trouble now. There are some theorists that say this could be the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression in the United States in the early 30s. Experts place the blame on many things, and that's what experts do. They look and they see where the problem is, and they try to fix a point at which we can point to the beginning of the problem. Some say the collapse of large financial institutions. We've seen the demise of some of the biggest financial institutions in the history of the finance market. We've seen them fall. The bailout of banks. Some of our banks had gotten into serious trouble and the government had to bail them out. A downward spiral in the stock market. Well, there are a lot of things that could lead to spirals in the stock market, downward spirals. Wartime could lead to a downward spiral. A rumor of wartime could lead to downward spiral. Another factor, long periods of unemployment. In 2008, the housing market was at its peak, and when it began to take a nosedive, a lot of the securities that were tied to the housing market also took a nosedive. When that happened, the ripple was felt throughout the world. It was not that there was no international response to the crisis. The United Kingdom began responding by cutting their spending. They began increasing taxes. But as we all know, that has not worked in the past, and it did not work for them. Some place the blame totally and solely at the feet of the United States. But then we must realize Japan has had bailout issues, and Sweden has had bailout issues. One financial expert who wrote an important article entitled A Historical Perspective on the 2007-2008 Financial Crisis, his name is Bordeaux, and he says that the United States is totally to blame. He tells us that there are no hard and fast rules. Everyone plays by their own set of rules. There are too many changes in the regulatory system. When one change comes down, it's not implemented before another change comes down and knocks that change out. So we have too many changes in the pipeline, and nothing is really hard and fast. When the mortgages went into default, it was devastating to the international financial market. Researchers Reinhart and Rogoff also blame the mortgage dilemma. They speak to the high rate of default. They propose that there is a lack of transparency in the housing market. In other words, no one really knows what's going on. They see the superficial, and that's all they see, because it clouds the rest of the activities that are going on behind the scenes. Now, there have been quite a few proposals that would help us to avoid future crises. If everyone involved had a better working knowledge of the mechanisms of the international financial market, that it has been said that that would help. Regulators should hone their abilities to predict changes in the market. They need to be able to spot something happening and do something to stop it. If you see an instance occurring now that brought the market down in 2005, regulators should be on top of their game and predict that if we continue on this path, we will have another crisis on our hand. The financial instruments used are complex. There are so many different financial instruments used until no one can keep track of who's doing what and which instrument yields the best refund and gives the best profit and secures a loan the best. Now, some of the proposed fixes are: we could formulate a committee that would review and oversee the larger financial institutions. They possibly need an oversight committee, someone that could stand out and look inside and see what's going on and help alleviate this problem. If a small problem arises, don't wait until it grows to respond. Jump on it as soon as you see it occurring and share information with other nations. Every nation has a set of rules, and there is very little similarity among nations on their financial rules. Look for weaknesses in the system. Due diligence. Look for those things that could bring the market to a crash or bring it into a downward spiral. Another thing that could be done is to seek a common ground for international financial rules. Allow room for more competition. Let some of the smaller players get involved in the international financial market, and then that would cause more competition and more activity and more liquidity in the market. Use the data that's gleaned by the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. They keep track of an enormous amount of data. And if this data is used to predict crises, maybe one could be averted in the future. Theorist Hudson looks at the theories of the economist Keynes. Now, Hudson believes Keynes solutions can remedy the problem we find ourselves in now. The theorist Hudson points to the fact that there are things that hinder the success of the dollar. There are recurring monetary crises. It seems like every year there's another crisis, and sometimes the theorists say, well, this lasted from 2007 to 2009, but in 2008 we had another crisis. The fluctuation of the value of the dollar causes panic in the financial market. Now, if we have a problem, if you become a international business expert, then it will be up to you to find a solution for this problem. If you go into the financial arena of international business, it will be up to you to provide methods by which we can avert these crises and avoid monetary collapse. It is just so long that the international market can stay in a crisis situation, and you can be the one to find the answer. This is the end of section 5. Thank you very much.